I'm Emily Mitchell, and for 15 years I was the family's big disappointment. While my sister racked up Harvard degrees and six-figure job offers, I was teaching finger painting to 5-year-olds. Last week at her graduation party, my parents gave her the keys to a Tesla and a $13 million Manhattan penthouse right in front of 200 guests. They called her the family's one and only success story. I was in the back, invisible like always, until some guy in a charcoal suit handed me an envelope. "Your grandfather knew the truth," he whispered. What happened next left my entire family totally speechless. Before we get into it, please go ahead and like and subscribe, but only if this story really hits home for you. I'd love to know where you're all watching from and what time it is. Now let me tell you how one single piece of paper changed everything. The Mitchell family penthouse looked out over Central Park from the 68th floor. Every single morning, I'd watch my parents drink coffee from their Waterford crystal planning Madison's future from that $50,000 or so walnut dining table. That Monet painting over the fireplace, the real one, not some print, cost more than I'll make in 20 lifetimes as a public school art teacher. Meanwhile, my studio in Queens had water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanked like it had serious anger issues. While Madison was carrying around Hermes bags that cost more than my rent for a whole year, I was lugging my art supplies in a canvas bag I painted myself back in college. The difference between us wasn't exactly subtle, and my parents made damn sure everyone knew it. Emily teaches at PS 47. My mom would tell her friends at the country club, her voice all low like she was admitting to a crime. Madison just made the Harvard Law Review. It was always a comparison like salt and pepper. Except she was the fancy Himalayan pink salt, and I was just plain old dirt. But here's the thing. They didn't get I loved my job. Every single morning, 23 second graders would run up and hug me, their faces just lighting up when they saw the art supplies I bought with my own cash. Their parents, immigrants, single moms, dads working 3 jobs, would thank me with tears in their eyes when their kids brought home paintings that made them feel seen. My parents never even asked about my work. They didn't know about the awards stuffed in my desk drawer, or the letters from parents saying I'd changed their kids' lives. To them, success was all about stock portfolios and a summer house in the Hamptons. But I still showed up to every family dinner, every party. I didn't do it for them. I did it for my grandfather, who died 10 years ago. He was the only one who ever told me, "Emily, you're going to change the world, just not in the way they expect." I had no idea how right he was. So Madison graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law last week. The dean himself shook her hand, and the law firm White & Case offered her a starting salary of $215,000 before she even tossed her cap in the air. Her Patek Philippe watch, a graduation gift from our dad, cost more than my entire $42,000 salary. She's 28, 4 years younger than me, and she already has an investment portfolio that would make most CEOs jealous. Her LinkedIn profile is like some Wall Street fairy tale. Harvard for undergrad, Harvard for law school, a summer job at 3 different Fortune 500 companies, published twice in the Yale Law Journal. And my mind just said, I'm an art teacher at PS 47, and I believe every kid is an artist. The family group chat that week, though, it was all about Madison. Pics of her in a cap and gown, screenshots of congrats from senators and CEOs, a video of her giving the valedictorian speech. My message? Congrats, Madison, got a heart emoji. That's it. But what that chat didn't show were the 8 National Education Awards sitting in my desk drawer, or the Teacher of the Year award I've won 3 times, or the art therapy program I built from the ground up that now helps 500 kids with disabilities across 3 boroughs. I never mentioned any of it. What was the point? In my family, that stuff was worthless. The invitation to Madison's graduation party was on cardstock so thick you could use it as a weapon, celebrating Madison's extraordinary achievement. It said in gold foil. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, Emily, please dress appropriately. I wore my best dress, a simple black one from Target. Madison, of course, would be in custom Versace. Some things never change. At least that's what I thought. Why can't you be more like Madison? That question followed me my whole childhood like a shadow that bites. I'd bring home an A- in calculus, and Madison had already skipped 2 grades. I won the state art competition when I was 16, and Madison had just gotten into Harvard at 17. My accomplishments were just footnotes in the big story of Madison Mitchell, the future Supreme Court Justice, as my dad always slurred after his 3rd scotch. My mom was a pro at how she introduced us at parties. This is Madison, our Harvard law student. She'd beam her diamonds catching the light. Then if someone pushed, oh, and this is Emily, she teaches. That little pause before teaches was filled with disappointment. I got into teaching because of Mr. Johnson, my art teacher in high school. He found me crying in the supply closet after another. Why can't you be like your sister? Talk. He said something I never forgot. Some people build skyscrapers, Emily. Others build souls. Guess which one lasted longer? I wanted to build souls. My parents wanted me to build a stock portfolio. The family photo wall said it all. Madison's achievements took up a whole section. Diplomas, newspaper clippings, photos with governors. My section had one photo, my college graduation, and even that was half hidden behind Madison's Harvard acceptance letter, the one my mom had framed in gold. 10 years of therapy taught me to stop needing their approval. But knowing that in your head and feeling it in your gut are 2 different things. So I kept showing up, kept on smiling. I kept pretending their words didn't cut me up inside. From a corner of the St. Regis ballroom, a guy in a charcoal suit was watching me. He'd been there since I walked in, and his stare felt like he knew something, like he was waiting. The ballroom at the St. Regis was dripping with the kind of money that doesn't need to be loud. 200 guests sipped Dom Perignon from crystal flutes, and waiters brought around beluga caviar on silver trays that cost more than my car. Every single corner screamed money, from the 30-foot ceiling covered in silk to the orchids they flew in from Thailand that morning. My father clinked his champagne glass with a gold pen. Of course he did. It was gold. The room went dead quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for the only success that matters in the Mitchell family. He lifted his glass to Madison, who was just standing there in her custom Versace, looking like a perfect, ambitious statue. My daughter, the Harvard law grad, the only one. And just like that, I wasn't even a side note. I was just erased. My mom was working the room, her voice floating over the string music. Madison's starting at Sullivan and Cromwell next month. I heard her tell the mayor's wife. Then she saw me over by the shrimp. Oh, and that's Emily. She teaches finger painting to kids. The way she said finger painting, you'd think I was pushing something shady on toddlers. A woman in a Chanel suit asked what grade I taught. Before I could even answer, my mom jumped in. Elementary. Very elementary. The woman's smile was pure pity. Oh, how nice that you found a little something you can do. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text just said, don't leave early tonight. Your grandfather left you more than just memories. I looked up, scanning the room. The guy in the dark suit gave his champagne glass a tiny little lift. It was so small, I'm sure only I saw it. My father was back at the mic. And now for the real surprise of the evening. Madison. My father's voice just boomed. Success deserves to be rewarded. He pulled a small velvet box out of his pocket, and you could feel the whole room lean in. The keys to your new Tesla Model S Plaid. People gasped. Somebody actually clapped. The key fob was sparkling under the chandeliers. A $130,000 car for a 28-year-old who already has a BMW. Madison floated up to the mic, flashing that perfect smile she's had for years. Thank you, Daddy, she said, holding the keys up like a prize. The photographer my parents hired, they hired a professional, for this was snapping pictures from every angle. But that's not all, my mom chimed in, joining them on stage. She pulled an envelope from her purse, the Hermes one, of course. The $30,000 Birkin that could probably feed a town. Inside this envelope is the deed to your new home, a $13 million penthouse in Tribeca, 4 bedrooms, a private terrace, and a view of the whole city you're about to take over. $13 million. For some perspective, that could fund my school's entire art program for the next 100 years. It could pay for therapy for thousands of kids who'd never get it. But no, it was going to house one person who already had everything. Madison hugged them both, and the photographer just went nuts. The whole room started clapping, and it felt like little hammers hitting my skull. I just stood in my corner, completely invisible, holding my champagne glass so tight, I thought it might shatter. This Tesla is just the beginning of what you deserve, Madison, my father said into the microphone. His words just hung in the air, a reminder of all the years he compared us, of every time he looked right through me like I wasn't even there. The man in the dark suit moved a little closer. He didn't make a big deal of it, just slipped through the crowd until he was close enough to hear. He wasn't watching Madison's big moment. He was watching me. My phone buzzed again. The real show starts in 5 minutes. Don't sign anything. Sign anything. What could I possibly sign? Emily. My mother's voice cut right through my thoughts. Get up here, please. We need you on stage. Madison was holding the mic like she owned the place. Her big Harvard law ring flashed under the lights. I just want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with us, she started. Her voice was super sweet, but you could feel the poison underneath. Success isn't something that just happens. It takes hard work, ambition, and the guts to want more than... She paused. Her eyes locked right onto mine. Finger paints and participation trophies. A few people in the crowd laughed, but it was awkward. I heard someone whisper, "Wow, harsh." And another person said, "But she's right." Some people, Madison went on, are just happy being average. They like their small lives, their small dreams, their small paychecks. And that's fine. The world needs teachers for the ABCs while the rest of us are arguing cases in the Supreme Court. My face was on fire. It felt like 200 pairs of eyes were trying not to stare at me, but they totally were. A lady in pearls whispered to her husband loud enough to hear, "Is that the teacher's sister, that poor thing?" But tonight's not about the people who settle, Madison said. She raised her glass of champagne. It's about being the best. It's about proving that with the right attitude, the right school, and the right priorities, anyone can. Excuse me. This guy in a dark suit stepped forward. The crowd just parted for him like he was important. He was older than I thought, maybe 75, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. His voice was quiet, but the whole room heard him. "My name is Richard Patterson. I was your grandfather's lawyer for 40 years. My dad's face went white as a sheet. I saw my mom's champagne glass start to shake. "I have something that needs to be said tonight," Richard continued, pulling a leather envelope out of his coat. "Before any other announcements get made." Madison's smile just froze on her face. "I don't think, oh, but I do," Richard said. "In fact, your grandfather insisted on it. My dad snapped out of it pretty fast. He always does when someone challenges him. Mr. Patterson, this is a private family party. Whatever you have to say can wait." Actually, it can't. Richard's voice was still calm, but it had an edge to it now, especially not with what you're about to do. My dad's jaw got tight. He knew. They both knew. My parents gave each other a look that lasted just a second too long. "As I was saying," my dad said, turning back to the mic. He was talking faster now. "Madison will also be inheriting the entire Mitchell family estate. The company, the houses, everything. She's proven she can handle it." The room exploded with applause and congratulations. Madison was beaming. My mom was smiling so hard I thought her Botox would crack. Emily, on the other hand, my dad kept going and my stomach just dropped. She just doesn't have what it takes for that kind of responsibility. Teaching little kids to finger paint is a sweet job, I suppose, but it doesn't prepare you to manage millions. Some people build empires, others finger paint. Every word felt like a punch. That's when my mom jumped in, pulling another paper out of her purse. We just need Emily to sign this, waiving her rights to the inheritance. It's really for the best. The whole room went dead silent. This was way too much drama, even for them. Come on up, Emily. The way my father said it wasn't a question. I walked up to that stage on legs that felt like they were going to give out. 200 people watched me walk up those 3 steps. Some lady in Chanel whispered about how awkward family drama is. Someone else mumbled something about knowing your place. My mom held out the waiver and a Mont Blanc pen. Just sign it? Sweetheart, don't make this any harder than it has to be. Then Richard Patterson stepped onto the stage. You need to stop right now, my father snapped. You have no authority here. But Richard just smiled. It wasn't a friendly one. Your father would disagree. And since he's the one who actually built this empire, you're so ready to carve up. I'd say his opinion matters. The pen felt heavy in my hand. 200 guests just waited. Madison's smile could have cut glass. The waiver sat on the podium, all the legal words blurring as I fought back tears. Sign it, Emily. My mother hissed, her voice low so the mic wouldn't pick it up. For once in your life, do the right thing. The right thing for them, I thought, which meant I had to disappear. Madison leaned into her own microphone. This is what's best for everyone, Emily. You know you can't handle this kind of responsibility. Remember when you couldn't even manage your college loans without crying? Someone in the crowd actually laughed. My hand moved toward the signature line. Emily Mitchell. That's when Richard Patterson's voice rang out clear and sharp. I need you to know something before you sign that document. My father stepped between us. Mr. Patterson, you're trespassing. Security. I'm here as the executor of William Mitchell's estate, Richard said, his voice getting louder. Your grandfather's real estate? The one your parents have been hiding for 10 years. The ballroom went dead quiet. I could hear my mother's pearls clicking together as she trembled. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice cracked. My father's will was simple everything to me. The will you filed was simple, Richard corrected. The actual will, the one I've kept in 3 separate safety deposit boxes with video testimony and multiple witnesses, is anything but simple. He pulled a thick document from his leather envelope. The gold seal of New York State caught the light. I have something you all need to see, Richard announced to the room. Something that changes everything about tonight's announcement. Madison grabbed for the waiver. Just sign it now, Emily. Whatever this is, it doesn't matter. But my hand was frozen. Richard Patterson was looking at me, and he had my grandfather's eyes. Kind, knowing and absolutely certain. If you've ever felt undervalued for choosing your passion over profit, please like this video. What happens next will change how you see success. Subscribe to hear more stories about quiet justice and the power of patience. I looked at the pen in my hand, then at the faces staring at me. Madison glowing because she was so sure she'd won. My parents looking impatient and annoyed. The crowd waiting for the teacher to accept her place at the bottom of the family food chain. For a second, I almost signed it. 15 years of being the disappointment felt like a lead blanket on my shoulders. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was meant for small things, small dreams, a small impact. Maybe teaching kids to paint rainbows wasn't worth as much as arguing about corporate mergers. Sometimes loving your family means letting go, I said quietly, but the microphone caught my words. I saw my mother relax. Madison smirked. My dad nodded, totally pleased. I held the pen right over the signature line. One signature, and I'd never have to deal with another comparison. Another, why can't you be more like Madison, lecture. Another family dinner, where they treat my work like it's just some hobby. The pen touched the paper. Your grandfather wrote you letters. Richard said that out of nowhere. 23 letters over 10 years. Your parents sent every single one back unopened. My hand froze. What letters? I looked at my parents. What's he talking about? My mom's face went completely white under her makeup. It doesn't matter now? Oh, but it does. Richard pulled out a stack of old yellowed envelopes. William Mitchell spent the last 10 years of his life writing down something very specific, something about his granddaughters. He held up the document again, the real will. Before you sign anything, Emily, you need to know what your grandfather knew. You need to know why he called you the one who would change everything. The pen slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the podium. Show me, I said. You have no right. My father's voice boomed across the room, his face turning bright red. Security, get this man out of here now. 2 security guards started to walk over, but Richard held the document up high. I'd think very carefully before you do that. Messing with the legal execution of a will is a felony. And everyone in this room is now a witness. The guards stopped dead in their tracks. The crowd started whispering. Somebody was definitely filming this on their phone. My mom tried a different tactic. Her voice was sickly sweet. Mr. Patterson, surely this can wait until Monday. We're in the middle of a family celebration. A celebration where you're forcing your daughter to sign away her inheritance. Richard's eyebrows shot up. How festive. There's nothing to inherit, my father snapped. I'm the only beneficiary of my father's estate. The will was read 10 years ago. A will was read, Richard corrected. The one you filed after you destroyed the original one. Or I should say after you thought you destroyed it. The whole room gasped. Madison grabbed my dad's arm. Daddy, what is he talking about? Your grandfather was a lot of things. Richard continued, speaking to the whole room now. But stupid wasn't one of them. He knew his son well enough to make several copies of his real will. Notarized, witnessed, videotaped, completely ironclad. He turned to me. He also knew his granddaughters, both of them, and he made plans for that. My mom was frantically dialing her phone. Douglas, yes, we need you at the St. Regis. Immediately. Bring the files on. She stopped, seeing that everyone was watching her. Just get here. Calling your lawyer? Richard asked calmly. Good. He'll want to see this, especially Article 7. What's Article 7? I asked, my voice sounding way calmer than I felt. Richard smiled, the first real warm expression I'd seen from him. The part your grandfather called the Truth Clause. It's the part that explains why he spent 10 years watching both of his granddaughters from a distance, writing down everything. My dad lunged for the papers. Richard just stepped back, surprisingly quick for his age. Should we read it together? Richard asked. Or would you rather tell them what you've been hiding yourself? Richard opened the will. The pages were crisp even though they were old. This will was signed by Thomas Mitchell on March 15th, back in 2015, in front of 3 witnesses and a notary. It was then filed with my firm, and we sent copies to 2 other law firms to keep them safe. That's impossible, my father said, but he didn't sound so sure anymore. I handled his estate. You handled what you wanted to handle, Richard cut in. Your father knew you would. That's why he left very specific instructions on when and how this will should be revealed. He looked right at me. He wanted to wait until both granddaughters showed their true colors. Tonight seemed like the right time, considering. Madison pushed forward. This is ridiculous. Even if there's another will, it can't just override the old one. Actually, Miss Mitchell, with your Harvard law education, you should know that a newer will, when it's done right, absolutely overrides an earlier one. Especially when the first one was, let's just say, creatively edited. My parents shot each other another look. My mother's hands were shaking. Your grandfather spent 10 years documenting something very specific. Richard continued. The real contributions his granddaughters made to the world. Not the degrees, not the salaries, the actual impact. He pulled out a folder stuffed with papers. Emily, did you know your grandfather hired a private investigator to follow your career? Not to spy, but to document every award you won that your parents ignored. Every child whose life you changed, Every family you helped with your art therapy program. The room was dead silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. He has files on both of you, Richard said, looking from Madison to me. And based on those files, he decided who should get the Mitchell legacy. This is insane, Madison said, but her voice was shaky. No, Richard replied. This is justice. So should we read Article 7 now? Madison's Harvard training kicked in. I want to see the authentication the notary seals the witness signatures. Timestamp verification. This could be faked. Anyone can make documents look old. Spoken like a true lawyer, Richard said, nodding. He pulled out a manila folder. Notarized at 3 separate locations. Here's the seal from New York State. I had it authenticated last week, 'cause I knew tonight was happening. Here's the witness list. Judge Sarah Collins, Dr. Michael Chen from Mount Sinai, and Eleanor Roosevelt III from the Manhattan Trust Foundation. Madison scanned the papers, her face getting paler with each page. These are real. Of course they're real, Richard said. Your grandfather didn't leave anything to chance. He also recorded a video of the signing. He held up an iPad. Would you like to see your grandfather explain his decision in his own words? This is entrapment, my father shouted. You waited until you tried to make Emily sign away rights you knew she had, Richard asked. Yes, I did wait. Your father predicted you'd do exactly this. He said he'll try to give everything to Madison the moment he thinks he can get away with it. Wait for that moment. Then show them the truth. The whole room was glued to the drama. Someone whispered, This is better than Netflix. Madison turned on our parents. You knew. You knew there was another will, and you hid it. My mother's silence was all the answer I needed. 10 years, Richard said. They've known for 10 years. They found the first copy in your grandfather's desk and destroyed it. What they didn't know is that he'd already filed copies with 3 different law firms and even recorded himself signing it. I'll fight this in court, Madison said, but she didn't sound very confident. On what grounds? Richard asked. He wasn't in his right mind. Your grandfather's medical records show his mind was perfectly clear. She pressured him. He hadn't even seen Emily in years when he wrote this. Face it, counselor. This will is ironclad. He flipped to page 7. Now, let's go over the rules your grandfather set for the inheritance, shall we? Richard adjusted his glasses, holding the papers firmly. Article 7 Conditions for Inheriting. I, Thomas Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, establish that my estate will go to the granddaughter who shows true service to others not measured by diplomas or how much money she makes. But by the real provable good she's done in people's lives. The room was so quiet, I could hear my own heart pounding. And what's more, Richard went on, this impact has to be documented by outside sources. Not family, not friends, but by groups and people who have nothing to gain from this, Madison laughed. But it didn't sound real. That's completely a matter of opinion. How can you even measure something like that? Your grandfather already thought of that. Richard pulled out another folder. This one had Emily's name on it. He set up very specific rules. Letters from people she's helped, awards from official organizations, news stories about her charity work, performance reviews from her bosses, all of it dated and double-checked. He put the folder on the stand. It was about 3 inches thick. Emily Mitchell, he read from a summary page. 8 National Education Excellence Awards. A 3-time Teacher of the Year. Founder of Art Heals, a therapy program helping 500 kids with disabilities across 3 boroughs. Published in the Journal of Art Therapy for her groundbreaking work with kids on the autism spectrum. And recognized by the Department of Education for her new ideas in inclusive education. My mother gasped, That can't be right. She never told you because you never bothered to ask, Richard said flatly. You were all too busy celebrating Madison's wins to even see that Emily was quietly changing the world. He pulled out another piece of paper. Letters from 237 different families, all verified, saying Emily completely changed their children's lives. 14 children who couldn't speak before her art program. And now they communicate through their art. 3 times she stopped a kid from taking their own life, all directly because she stepped in. Tears were just streaming down my face. I had no idea he knew. I didn't think anyone was even paying attention. Your grandfather called you, the quiet one who serves, Richard said softly to me. He saw what everyone else missed. Richard opened a second folder. This one was stuffed with photos and letters. Your grandfather hired investigators, not to spy on you, but to prove what your parents refused to see. Emily, did you have any idea the mayor's office has your picture on their wall for New York's quiet heroes? I just shook my head. I couldn't even speak. 3 years ago, you spent all of your savings to keep your art program going after the school cut its funding. You took a second job tutoring just to buy supplies. You never said a word to anyone. He held up a bank statement. Your grandfather's investigator wrote down every single sacrifice. Then a woman in the crowd, a Mrs. Then Davis from the PTA shot up out of his chair. That's my son's teacher. She saved his life. He was diagnosed with selective mutism. The kid wouldn't speak for 2 years. Emily taught him to paint what he wanted to say. Now he never shuts up. He glared right at my parents. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Then other people started standing up. A man in a navy suit said she taught my daughter after she went deaf. She told her art doesn't need words or sound. Another parent stood. My son has autism. Emily used her lunch breaks to work with him for free. He just got into art school. My parents looked completely floored. Madison's mouth was just hanging open. Your grandfather followed every single story, Richard said, pulling out newspaper clippings. Local teacher transforms lives through art. Innovative program brings hope to special needs families. The quiet revolution in room 203. He looked dead at my parents. You had every chance to know this. You chose not to look. Then he turned to Madison. Now, Miss Mitchell, do you want me to read your grandfather's opinion of your contributions? Or should we just skip to the end? Madison's face was pure stone. Read it. Richard nodded. All right, but I'm warning you. Your grandfather was thorough and he was honest. Richard pulled out Madison's folder. It was a lot thinner than mine. Madison Mitchell, Harvard Law, summa cum laude law review editor. Starting salary $215,000. He paused. Community service. Only the mandatory pro bono hours for law school. 40 hours total over 3 years. No volunteer work beyond what was required. Madison's face turned bright red. I was building my career. You were building your resume, Richard corrected. Your grandfather saw the difference. He also noted this. In 2019, you volunteered to run a charity auction for poor kids. You raised $30,000. He let that sink in. You also charged the charity a $15,000 administrative fee. Gasps went through the room. That was from my time, Madison protested. From a children's charity. Richard's eyebrows shot up. Your grandfather found that very telling. He pulled out another's paper. 2020, you offered to help a homeless shelter for free. When you found out they couldn't give you a big enough tax write-off, you took back the offer. 2021, you volunteered to mentor inner-city kids. You showed up once, took pictures for your LinkedIn, and never came back. My parents were just frozen. This wasn't the Madison they'd always bragged about. Then Richard pointed to my huge folder. Emily has letters from the Department of Education, the National Arts Teachers Association, the Autism Society, the Children's Hospital of New York. And then he pulled out one last official letter. The White House Office of Public Engagement, praising her for her amazing service to America's most vulnerable children. He held up both our folders. One granddaughter has degrees and dollars. The other has changed hundreds of lives. Your grandfather's will is crystal clear about who gets what. But there's more, Richard said, and his voice got low, making everyone lean in. Article 7 has a second part, a clause your grandfather called the humility provision. Right then, Madison's lawyer ran in all out of breath. Don't say another word, he told Madison and my parents. Oh, I think everyone here wants to hear this, Richard said with a smile. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the strongest. If this story got to you, please comment below. Where are you watching from? Let us know. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the fireworks. Madison's lawyer, Douglas Fitzgerald, started shoving his way through the crowd. His Armani suit was spotless, even though he was in a hurry. This is not how this is done. Any issues with a will are handled in probate court, not at a party. There are no issues, Richard said calmly. I'm just following Thomas Mitchell's direct orders. He wanted this out in the open in front of everybody, especially when the family tried to write Emily out of her inheritance. Madison grabbed Douglas's arm. Tell them this is a joke. Tell them I'll sue them for slander, for emotional distress, for what? Richard cut in. For telling the truth. Your grandfather kept records, Miss Mitchell. Pro bono hours are public information. Charity finances are public too. And your LinkedIn posts about mentoring. They're still up, but the shelter says you only came once. This is a hit job. Madison's voice cracked. No. A voice cut in from the crowd. It was Judge Patricia Hornby, one of the will's witnesses. This is called accountability. I watched Thomas Mitchell sign this will. He was heartbroken over what his son became, how making money replaced being a good person. He said to me, Patricia, I built this fortune to help people, not to create monsters. Then more parents from my school stood up. Mr. Rodriguez, whose son has severe ADHD. Emily Mitchell spent every Thursday after school with my boy for 2 years, never took a dime. He's in college now because of her. Then Mrs. Kim spoke. My daughter was bullied over her disability. Emily made a whole anti-bullying art program. It changed the entire school. Then Dr. Patel. She's at our children's hospital every Saturday. Brings art supplies she pays for out of her own pocket. Madison looked around frantically. Money doesn't make you a good person, Madison. I heard myself say, my voice totally steady. Making a difference does. You turned him against me? Madison shrieked. You must have. Richard cut her off. Emily hadn't seen her grandfather in 5 years before he died, by your parents' choice. They told him she was too busy with her little teaching job to visit. My dad's inner CEO kicked right in. When you're trapped, you negotiate. Okay, let's be reasonable. We can work something out, split it all 50-50. That's fair? It's fair. Richard's voice was all business. Was it fair when you told your father that Emily dropped out of college? She graduated with honors. Was it fair when you claimed she was unemployed? She was teaching full-time. Was it fair when you sent back every letter he tried to mail her? My mother clutched her Hermes bag like a life raft, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. We only wanted what was best for the family. Madison had all this potential and Emily just didn't. Richard waved his hand at the crowd. Half this room can tell you about Emily's potential. The difference is, she used hers to lift people up, not step on them to get ahead. Please. My mother begged me, her voice cracking. Emily, sweetheart, think about our reputation. If this gets out, it's already out, someone shouted. You could see at least 3 phones recording. My father tried one last time. Emily, you don't get how money works. The company needs someone who knows business. The company. Richard just laughed. You mean the real estate business your dad built with his patents? The ones he came up with while teaching at Collier before he knew his own son would care more about property than people. Douglas was whispering something to my parents fast. Madison was just frozen. You could see her perfect world falling apart right in front of her. We can say he wasn't in his right mind, Douglas whispered. But everyone heard him. Judge Hornby got to his feet. I'd be glad to talk about William's state of mind. He was sharp as a tack. He beat me at chess the day before he passed. My dad's shoulders just slumped. My mom collapsed into a chair. Emily, my dad said, his voice low, what do you want? For 15 years, I'd said nothing. I was the quiet one, the let down, the one they forgot about. Now 200 people were waiting to hear what I'd say. "What do I want?" I said again, my voice filling the room. I wanted parents who actually saw me, who cared more about people than paychecks, who got that teaching isn't giving up. It's building the future one kid at a time. I walked up to the mic, and my cheap Target dress suddenly felt like a suit of armor. I spent 15 years thinking I was less than Madison, because I didn't have as much money, because my car was a piece of junk, because my apartment building didn't have a doorman. I looked right at my parents. "You taught me that money is all that matters." Grandfather knew that wasn't true. The whole room was dead silent except for someone crying softly. It was Mrs. Davis, whose son I'd taught to express himself with art. "I don't need your money," I said, looking straight at my parents. "I needed you to be as proud of my first teaching award as you were of Madison's first A+. I needed a family that understood helping one kid means more than charging by the hour." Madison finally spoke up. "Oh, you're so holy, so perfect. You think you're better than us just 'cause you're broke." "No," I said, keeping it simple. "I think I'm happy because I'm helping people. There's a big difference between making a lot of money and making a difference." Grandfather got that? Richard cleared his throat. "Speaking of what your grandfather understood, there's another part of Article 7 we need to go over. The rules for Madison." Everyone looked at him. "Your grandfather didn't cut you out," Richard said to Madison, "but your money comes with strings attached." Madison's face lit up with a little hope. "What strings?" 2 years of public service, and it has to be documented. Real work, not just smiling for cameras or padding your resume. Teaching, volunteering, actually doing some good for a change. After that, you get your share. That's blackmail. "No, it's a lesson," Richard shot back. "Your grandfather's last try at teaching you what your parents never did. That being privileged means you have to be responsible." "But I have a condition too," I said. And just like that, all eyes were back on me. Richard smirked like he knew this was coming. "Before you say what it is, Emily, there's one more thing." He turned the page. "The humility clause, subsection C." Then he read it. "It says if any of you try to bully, trick, or force another one to give up their inheritance, the one doing the bullying loses everything. Instantly. For good." My parents' faces went pale. Madison had to grab the podium to hold herself up. "And what's more," Richard went on, "if it happens in public with a bunch of witnesses, the inheritance they just lost goes straight to the wronged party, which kicks in the emergency trust fund of $15 million. And that's totally separate from the estate." Douglas was frantically swiping on his phone, probably looking up legal stuff. That's ironclad," Richard said, gesturing to everyone in the room. "Tonight, Robert and Margaret Mitchell, along with Madison Mitchell, tried to force Emily to sign away her inheritance in front of 200 witnesses. The conditions of subsection C have been met." $15 million, Madison whispered. "Your grandfather was very specific," Richard explained. "He said if they gang up on Emily, and they will, she needs to have the money to get on her own 2 feet immediately. The fund transfers the second there's proof of coercion." He then pulled out a tablet. "The transfer started the moment they called Emily to that stage to sign the waiver. Your grandfather's financial advisor has been watching the whole thing on a live stream. And yeah, Mr. Mitchell, that charity photographer you hired, he was actually recording all of this for the estate." My father just sank into a chair. "He planned all of this. He knew you," Richard said simply. "He knew you'd wait for a public moment to humiliate Emily as much as possible, to pressure her into giving in. He knew Madison would go along with it for her own selfish reasons, and he knew Emily would just take it quietly like she always has." "The company?" my mother asked weakly. "It goes into a trust with Emily as the one in charge." Then Richard looked right at me. "Though your grandfather really hoped you'd turn it into a foundation. He left some ideas about focusing on art therapy and special education." Madison was full-on ugly crying now, the kind you do when you've really lost something. My job offer? The firm has a morality clause, Douglas said quietly. If they find out I was involved in inheritance fraud, they'll pull the offer. The Tesla keys dropped from Madison's hand, clattering on the marble floor. And Douglas Fitzgerald, our own family's lawyer, had turned pale while he scrolled through his tablet. The legal trouble here is huge, trying to force her to sign tonight with witnesses and proof counts as inheritance fraud. The Bar Association will investigate. Madison, your law license application? No, Madison gasped. No, they can't. Oh, they can and they will, Judge Hornby cut in. Trying to cheat a relative out of their inheritance through public humiliation. The Character and Fitness Committee will have a field day with this. Harold pulled out more documents. The estate accounts were frozen 40 minutes ago. The second the coercion started, we have court orders signed by Judge Martinez, who's been watching this whole thing remotely. He held up papers with red seals. Robert Mitchell, your access to the company accounts is suspended while we investigate. The brownstone, the Hamptons house, the stock portfolio, it's all frozen. You can't do this, my father roared. I'm not doing anything, Richard shot back. I'm just following William Mitchell's exact instructions. He wrote, if Robert tries to steal from Emily, and I know he will stop him, immediately, and do it publicly. Then my mother's phone started ringing. She answered, her hands shaking. Hello? What do you mean frozen, all of them? She looked over at my father. The credit cards aren't working. The Penthouse, Madison asked desperately. The one you just gave me? It was never theirs to give. Richard said it's all part of the estate. And it's Emily's now. Someone in the crowd let out a low whistle. $13 million, plus the company that's worth $30 million, Richard added. Plus about $15 million in cash and the art collection. Your grandfather really loved his art. That's valued at $6 million. $64 million. Madison's knees just buckled. Someone shoved a chair under her. That's what Emily's parents tried to steal from her, Judge Hornby said, his voice booming. He made sure all the phones recording caught every single word. This was why Thomas Mitchell wanted witnesses. The whole room started whispering. This story was going to be all over the Upper East Side by morning and all over the internet before midnight. The Tesla, Madison asked, her voice barely a whisper. Bought it yesterday with money from the estate, Richard confirmed. It's going back to the dealership on Monday. Every single thing my parents showed off their whole successful life was built on theft, on stealing from the daughter they thought wasn't good enough. Madison Mitchell, Harvard Law, summa cum laude. The golden child who'd never failed a day in her life. She just completely fell apart. Her perfect makeup was streaming down her face as she sobbed. These weren't the pretty little tears from before. These were ugly, broken sobs. I don't get it, she gasped. I did everything right. Perfect grades, the perfect school, the perfect job. Perfect isn't the same as being good, Richard said gently. Your grandfather wrote about you. He said Madison has every advantage but no empathy. She has every skill but no kindness. Maybe losing it all will teach her what having it all never could. Madison looked right at me through her tears. For the first time ever, she actually saw me. She wasn't looking through me or past me. She was looking at me. You knew, she whispered. You knew you were worth more, and you never said a word. I didn't know about the will, I said, and I was being honest. But I knew my worth had nothing to do with money. You actually taught me that. Watching you chase cash and completely miss the point of everything. You taught me what not to care about. Madison's voice cracked. I've never really helped anyone, have I? Not really. Not without wanting something in return. The whole room was dead silent. Even the waiters stopped pretending to be busy. I don't even know how, Madison admitted. How to help someone, how to care about someone else doing well more than me. She looked over at our parents. You did this to me. You praised me every time I did something that made us look good, and you ignored every chance I had to become a better person. And now I'm 28 years old, and I have no idea who I am without my resume. That's the first honest thing you've said in years, my mother said quietly. Everyone was shocked. Madison got to her feet, a little shaky. Emily, I need that job. I'm not picky. Whatever you'll let me do, I need to learn. My father then stood up in front of everyone. This giant of real estate, a man who'd built his whole life on being Thomas Mitchell's son. And for the first time in my life, I really saw him. Not the CEO, not the head of the family, just a man who was completely lost. I measured everything the wrong way, he said, his voice filling the silent ballroom. Stock prices, square footage, net worth. I measured everything except the things that actually mattered. He turned to me. Emily, you were never the disappointment. I was. I disappointed my own father. I became everything he never wanted me to be. A man who knew the price of everything, but the value of nothing. My mother went and stood next to him, her perfect posture finally crumbling. We were so proud. When Madison got into Harvard, we framed the letter. But Emily, you have 237 letters from families whose lives you've changed, and we never framed a single one. She looked out at the crowd, at all their high society friends. We taught our girls that looks matter more than what's inside, that money is more important than your character. We were wrong. Someone started clapping. Mrs. Davis. Then another parent joined in. And another. They weren't clapping for my parents' confession, but because the truth was finally out. The irony, my father said with a bitter laugh, is that my own dad built this fortune as a teacher. He was a professor at Colia, who came up with 3 patents that changed the whole industry. He never cared about the money. He cared about knowledge, and I forgot that. He looked at Richard. He tried to tell me, didn't he? All these years. He tried to get me to focus on meaning, not money. Every week, Richard confirmed. He'd say, Robert, you're building a monument to nothing. Emily is building lives. We measured success in dollars, my mother said, looking at me, when we should have measured it in the lives you changed. The photographer, who I guess worked for the estate, got pictures of everything. The whole truth finally out there for everyone to see. My dad stood up straight. Emily, we don't deserve forgiveness, but we're asking for it anyway. I stood at the podium looking at my family broken, exposed, and finally honest. And I made my decision. I accept the inheritance, I said clearly. All of it just like grandfather wanted. You could hear Madison start to sob. But, I continued, I also accept his vision for it. The company will now be the Mitchell Foundation for Art Therapy and Special Education. The buildings will be for programs, not profits. The money will fund teachers, not takeovers. I turned to Madison. You want to learn to serve. You'll start Monday. Minimum wage working with our toughest kids. The ones who bite, who scream, who throw paint. You'll clean their messes and celebrate their breakthroughs. You'll learn that progress isn't measured by percentages, but by smiles. Yes, Madison said immediately. Yes, anything. 2 years, I said. Not because the will says you have to, but because that's how long it takes to understand teaching isn't about you. It's about them. If you last 2 years, and I mean really last, not just show up, then you'll get your inheritance. Just like grandfather wanted. Then I faced my parents. Forgiving you doesn't mean forgetting. It means we're choosing to move forward. You'll have access to a living trust, enough to live a comfortable life, not the excessive one you're used to. The brownstone stays in the family, but the Hamptons house is becoming a summer camp for special needs kids. My mother gasped. The Hamptons house, grandfather was specific about that. He said it should be filled with children's laughter, not cocktail party chatter. Richard smiled. Your grandfather saw this coming too. He said you'd be graceful even in victory. This isn't a victory, I corrected him. It's justice. And justice includes a second chance. I looked at the crowd, all those society people who watched me get humiliated for years. The Mitchell Foundation will be hiring real positions for real service, not for throwing galas and charity balls, but for hands-on work with kids who need us. Anyone who's interested can give their application to Mr. Patterson. A few hands shot right up. Emily, Madison said quietly, what about your condition? You said you had one. I just smiled. My condition's simple. Family therapy. All of us every week for a whole year. We're going to learn how to be a family that actually knows what's important. My parents nodded right away. Madison agreed too. Your grandfather would be proud, Richard said softly. He knew this would happen. That's when it all clicked for me. Every last detail. Richard confirmed it. He said you would teach them what he couldn't, that love isn't about dollars and family isn't about an inheritance. It's about inheriting values that are worth passing on. 6 months later, the Mitchell Foundation for Art Therapy and Special Education was helping 2,000 kids across 5 states. The Hampton House held its first summer camp with 40 kids who'd never even seen the ocean. The brownstone ballroom where my parents used to throw their big parties, well, now you could hear kids laughing in there during weekend art classes. Madison barely made it through the first month on sheer willpower. The second month is what broke her. A 7-year-old boy with autism had a meltdown and threw paint everywhere. It even got in Madison's hair. She ran off and cried in the supply closet. I found her in there covered in purple paint, and she was laughing. I'm really laughing for the first time in years. He was trying to paint the sound of happiness, she told me. He said purple sounds happy. Now she runs our sensory art program. She's incredible at it. That Harvard brain is finally being used for something that matters. Her salary is $43,000 a year. She drives a Honda Civic. She's never been happier. My parents volunteer every single Wednesday. Dad reads to the kids while Mom helps with art projects. Just last week, a kid gave my mother a hug and left little paint handprints all over her blouse. She wore those prints all day like they were medals of honor. The foundation has 50 full-time teachers, and they're all paid a minimum of $60,000, a living wage for doing life-changing work. We've partnered with 15 hospitals and 30 schools, and so many families who never thought their kids would be able to communicate until art gave them a language. Sullivan and Cromwell called last month. They wanted Madison back. They said they'd reconsidered. She just laughed and hung up. I have a purple happiness to paint, she told them. Richard Patterson is on our board. He says grandfather would be amazed at what we've built. I don't agree. I think grandfather knew exactly what would grow from the seeds he planted. I still teach at PS 47. Same classroom, same kids who need me. Same $42,000 salary from the school. The only difference is now I can buy all the supplies we ever need. Every kid gets their own easel, their own paints, their own chance to show the world what's inside them. My grandfather knew that a real inheritance isn't money. It's the impact you make. He spent 10 years just watching from a distance, writing down not what we accomplished, but the choices we made. He saw Madison choose status over helping others. He saw my parents choose appearances over being real, and he saw me choose purpose over profit. The will wasn't about punishment or a reward. It was about getting things straight. Putting the money into the hands of someone who'd use it for others, not just for herself. Grandfather didn't leave me millions. He left me a way to make more compassion in the world. Last week, Madison and I were going through grandfather's letters, the ones my parents had sent back. In one, he wrote, Emily, you're making the world a better place one kid at a time. I'll make sure you have all the colors you need someday. He kept his promise. My parents are different now. They're humbled, less proud, and they're actually present. They found out that being grandparents to 2,000 kids through the foundation brings them more joy than any business deal ever did. That art collection my grandfather left, it's hanging up in children's hospitals now. Picasso's and other paintings, watching over kids who make their own art between treatments. It was that stranger in the charcoal suit who changed everything. Richard still comes to our events. He always stands in the back, just watching and smiling. Last week he told me, "Your grandfather said you'd know what to do with the money." He also said, "Emily already gets the difference between having wealth and being wealthy." And he was right. I am wealthy. Not because I got $64 million, but because I got the understanding of what to do with it. Money is just paper until you use it to change people's lives. That's the real thing my grandfather left me. Not a fortune, but a purpose for it. If this story reminded you that your worth isn't decided by what other people think, please share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Subscribe for more stories about justice and the power of being patient. Comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have seen how much you're worth? Remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you need to watch.